Why should a startup consider tokenizing?
That's a unique question. I get asked quite a bit. So I advise 4 startups currently. They're not all crypto startups. And one thing that we talk a lot about is token economics and tokenization, obviously. And just my networking experience and going out to conferences and shaking hands and kissing babies and doing all that nonsense. It's one of the more common questions I get is, why should a startup tokenize? Well, in many cases, they shouldn't. I think it's important to note that there's many opportunities for startups to be successful and to grow, whether that's through fundraising or not, that don't involve tokenization. But a startup should tokenize for really one of 2 reasons at a macro level. A startup should tokenize if they're looking to have a security token and as a fundraising or crowdfunding mechanism. Crowdfunding is a $7 or $8 billion by transaction yearly industry. Crowdfunding is essentially where startups will pre-sell their product, or they will seed invest as a common platform where regular people can essentially invest in early stage startups, basically to provide liquidity to those startups, provide capital to those startups. So that way those startups can go forth and hire the appropriate people, do marketing, build out products, etc. So of course, if you want to raise money, tokenization is an option, though I think if we get into it, I'm certainly not all about the ICO or IEO craze. I think there's a lot of greed and a lot of bad that can come from that, but it is something to consider if you're going to register with the SEC and have a true security token offering, or tokenize if you feel that your product needs to be built on the blockchain, right? And as a believer in blockchain technology, as someone who believes that blockchain provides a lot of different benefits and values, there's a real case to be made for many startups, depending on the industry they're in, to build on top of blockchain and have a true utility token. Usually I try to guide those startups towards traditional fundraising, private rounds, investing modest amounts of money to get their product market fit figured out, raise just enough money to get a product in the hands of users and determine if it's something that they should spend the next 10 years building. But ultimately, Judy, I think there's really 5 benefits to really tokenizing. Of course, and this is under the assumption that it's not just a security raise, meaning you're not just doing it to raise money. I don't really think that's something that people should try to do. I really believe in the utility of crypto. So the first is, again, you're building on blockchain, is that it's immutable. And what that basically means is that once an investor buys tokens, they can't be erased by anyone. That ownership can't be taken away. Sure, you can be hacked and you could lose access to your crypto. That's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother AMA. But the fact that the blockchain is immutable is one of its best assets in and of itself, right? It's data that lives permanently, kind of etched in stone on the internet. The second is that it's accessible. Basically, industry can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. And it really takes, I think, a lot, especially here in the United States, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it increases our reach. It takes us outside of the Silicon Valley bubble that exists, or outside of the bubble of the fintech ecosystem here in Chicago. And 24/7 via really any device, people can access these tokens. They're divisible too, which is obviously unique. You don't have to buy one Bitcoin, right? You can buy a fragment of a Bitcoin, and that's true for any cryptocurrency, usually down to 1 Satoshi, which is fractions of a penny. And ultimately, those tokens, because they're divisible, have more liquidity, and more liquidity typically increases expected value from trade, and it really eliminates the need for minimum investments. So if you want to be a VC, for instance, typically you have to come forth with at least a $50,000 to $100,000 minimum investment. But of course, in the cryptocurrency sector, you can buy $100 worth of your favorite, cryptocurrency. And that obviously makes it, back to point number 2, more accessible. It's also pretty cost effective. So if you're a startup and you're looking to tokenize your shares, if you will, it really does eliminate the middleman. Again, it puts you on a global stage. You're not paying millions of dollars to list on the New York Stock Exchange. And also, there's a lot less regulatory pressure, and that's not always a bad thing for responsible entrepreneurs. I think this industry gets a bad rap sometimes because a lot of people took advantage of a lot of other people, but that's, I think, to be expected when new technology comes up and blows up the way crypto did. And then I think finally, you should tokenize because it's transparent. Ultimately, tokens eliminate asymmetry of information from a transfer of ownership perspective. Again, that blockchain always has that data trail. Blockchains are actually not private at all. They might, hide or obfuscate the owner's identity, but we can follow a token everywhere that it goes in perpetuity. And I think that's really important. I think transparency is really important, in the financial sector. I think it's something that we need more of.